remember hanging up the phone and kind of like hitting the steering wheel and being like, what am I doing wrong, God? Like, what am I doing that I need to learn? Like, what is going on here? Yeah, there's 3 babies in there. And she goes, yeah, you are pregnant with triplets. One of the things that I didn't know going into having triplets was that I'm learning to be a parent because these are our first kids. So I'm learning to be a dad, but I have to learn to be a dad to 3 different individuals. You have to make sure that you're being cognizant of everything that's going on, and making sure that we're present.
All right, welcome to the Rad Dad Podcast. This is episode 21. I have my friend Jesse Cardon on. We've known each other for a few years, but I see you in the gym. We're friends on Facebook. We kind of know each other through social media.
Same ward for a little bit.
Yeah. So, I saw you in the gym the other day, and I figured this would be an awesome episode, and here we are. Like a week later.
Thanks for having me here. Yeah, it was pretty quick.
Yeah.
It was just like, hey, you want to come on? And then here we are.
Yeah. Well, just to start off, tell me a little bit about like where you grew up and your childhood and maybe some highlights.
Yeah. So I grew up in northern Utah County in American Fork, lived there my whole life until really I went on my mission. And I grew up, I was an only child, and it's kind of weird how that happened because I have brothers and sisters. So my parents were both married previously, got divorced, and then got together and had me. I grew up in kind of an interesting situation in the fact that, so my dad, I think it's important just kind of for story wise, is my dad, his dad, he was the youngest of 9, and my dad was the youngest of 9, but his dad died when he was 6. And so he grew up really without a dad. Right. And so I think that kind of shaped a lot of his life and a lot of things that happened there. His brothers tried to step in, kind of into that dad role. I think that, when you get that dynamic, sometimes it just doesn't go well, right? When a brother is playing dad, but, and so that's my dad's like history, like a little bit of who he was. But so I grew up, as an only child, because my half brothers and sisters were all older than me, like 12, 14, I think one was 16 years older than me. And so I really had, a lot of gap between us. And so I have a really good relationship with one of my brothers, but the rest of them, we don't really have a relationship at all. And it's not because like anybody's like maliciously like, hey, we don't have a relationship, but it's it just hasn't happened. But my brother Monty, we have a really good relationship, and we talk all the time. But grew up, like I said, I grew up in American Fork, and went to high school there, and just couldn't change forks, so just came down here to Spanish.
Yeah, that's awesome. So was there a time in your life growing up where, or did you ever feel like, or did your dad ever feel like he was trying to figure it out? Or did you just see your dad as like, yeah, he's my dad and that's what a dad is, and that's it?
That's an interesting question, because we had conversations about it like growing up. And he always would say or apologize for not being the dad that he thought he should be. And it was always a little bit interesting. Not that it was bad or good for that matter. It was just, it was what it was.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say, hey, like I don't know what I would do in that situation. Right. Like, he was just trying to figure it out. And I think my mom was too. And, every child is different, but like when you've had kids, they've kind of grown up, and then you have the, the caboose come along.
Mm-hmm.
But then also I think that, my dad's really trying to learn, like, how do I instill those things into him? Because like he taught me work ethic. Like I remember as a kid, or even just like as a youth, the truck or the car would break down, and I was out there helping him, not holding the light exactly where it needs to be. You never do that. Right. But really just teaching me some of those fundamental things. Like I know how to change the oil in my car. I know how to do that work that's necessary just to do the things that we need to do. But I think that some of the life skills outside of that, maybe dealing with emotions and that kind of thing, I don't know that he knew how to deal with those emotions because he hadn't really been taught that. Because, without a dad in the home, you're really just kind of fending for yourself a little bit in that. Like his mom, my grandma, was great. She was a great mother, but there is something about those 2 roles in the house that really does help shape that life, whether in the house or just whether in your life, right? They just help shape you. And so I had a lot of people that kind of stood in as that help in that realm. a lot of mentors in my life that really helped shape who I became.
Gotcha. I love that. I'm sure, like for me at least, things just clicked when I became a father,
Yeah.
right? And I'm sure it's the same for you. Were there any times where after becoming a father, you're like, that makes sense. I understand why he made that decision. Or
Yeah. I think that the thing that has been the most interesting to learn as a dad is learning how to practice patience. um,
yeah,
and maybe the hardest thing to do. And I don't know that it gets easier. I hope it does at some point, but I haven't found it yet.
yeah,
But really just learning how to like take a step back and think through the situation and then act, because there's so much that happens in life that happens to us or around us that we get to choose how we want to react. But if we just react on emotion, then we are reacting emotionally, and it becomes a different situation. And if we take the time to really think through the situation, we're able to make better decisions. And I think that that's something like I look back at growing up or things that he tried to do, and I could see why he would take time maybe to think through a situation where as a kid I'm like, hey, just give me an answer, like let me know what I can do,
yeah,
or let me do know that I did wrong.
yeah.
But he was really just trying to analyze the situation and really just take that step forward.
Gotcha. Man, talking about patience, you know, when I was about to become a father, people would always be like, "Oh, you're gonna learn patience. You better be practicing patience." And I always thought like, "Yeah, patience. Okay, you gotta have patience. Cool, I'll do that."
Yeah.
But you said it perfectly. You have to take a step back, pull your emotions out of it, and it's like anything else. It takes practice,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's a consistently developing thing throughout parenthood.
Yeah.
But patience, man, it is key, and it's a different kind of patience when it comes to parenting.
And I think that one of the things that with emotions is helping ourselves and our kids or our spouses know it's okay to have those emotions. Emotions are
Right.
a great thing.
Yes.
It's when we're having the emotions, letting those kind of play out, but really trying to maybe move those not aside, but try to use those a little bit differently as we're making the decision. Because when we make decisions emotionally, a lot of times we regret those decisions or we just don't make the best decisions. But those emotions are important because we have to feel those. We have to feel that, whatever it is, sadness, happiness, anger, what hopefully a lot of happiness.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like if we're acting just in emotion, we don't really make the best decisions that we can make.
Wouldn't you love to go back and tell yourself that in the first month of fatherhood?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Just sit
No.
yourself down and
Yeah.
have a
And
little
yeah,
lesson.
first month of fatherhood was crazy. So
Yeah. Well, no time like the present. Let's get into your experience becoming a father.
yeah, and I think that maybe even just right before that, I think is an interesting part of the story, right? Is
Great.
so my wife and I, we got married, and we wanted to wait a little bit to have kids. And my wife's name's Callie, you know that, but
Hmm.
everybody in podcast world doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we wanted to wait a little bit, but then we started trying to have kids, and it just wasn't happening, right? Like it wasn't something that was there, and so we started seeing specialists, and we started seeing what was going on, and um, it became really hard, right? And then when I talk about emotions, like probably one of the most emotionally challenging times was trying to have kids for us.
Wow.
Because it just, again, it didn't happen. All of our friends are happening it. You get
Yeah.
the, hey, when are you having kids? You've been married for 3 years. What's going on? Right?
Yeah.
Like you get those questions, and not that anybody has ill intent, but it happens, right?
And it's Utah. I
And,
mean,
and it's Utah. And I think that sometimes it's just like, well, what is the right answer there? Like, do you really want the answer, or do you want me to give the sugar coated answer? But kind of going through that situation, one of the things that made me do is really reflect on my relationship, both with my wife, but then also with God. And I remember there was a time, and like I said, we were working with specialists, trying to figure out why we weren't having kids, and we was like, okay, this month it's gonna happen. Like it's gonna happen. And I remember driving home from work, and at this point, we were living in a basement apartment in American Fork, and driving home, Callie calls me, and she's like, it was negative.
mm,
And I remember hanging up, and if you drive in Utah County, that Linden corner, and I know exactly where I was at. And every time I drive it, the emotions come back a little bit. And I remember hanging up the phone and kind of like hitting the steering wheel and be like, what am I doing wrong, God? Like, what am I doing that I need to learn? Like, what is going on here? And for about 5 minutes, just felt that like just that anger. It was probably the most angry I've ever been in my entire life, really. And then all of a sudden it was just like, it's gonna be okay. Like everything's gonna be okay. I was like, all right, it's gonna be okay. Let's
Just
figure
like
this out.
that, like that
Yeah,
quick?
and it didn't, like, I had to kind of reflect back on that because the
Yeah,
feeling didn't last,
yeah,
because I went back to like, well, are you sure that's what you felt? Are you sure that's what's going
right,
on?
yeah,
And it became kind of this issue, or this, not issue, but this thing that I had to really rely on to say, hey, it's gonna work out. It's gonna be okay. So at that time, like, and I think that just kind of adds to the story of, sorry, becoming
yeah.
a father, right? Is I had been preparing for, I wanted to go to medical school to become a podiatrist. And so I had studied and taken the MCAT, I had done all the fun classes in college, your OCHEMs, your biologies and all that. And was applying and had some, or was getting ready to set up some interviews. And we felt like, no, like, this isn't what you're going to do. Like, you need to kind of pursue your career in the career I was in plasma. And that was a big life change because we had been, Callie had quit school to just kind of work and help provide. And, I was working as well, but we didn't want to go into debt for school. And it was really an about face. And so we're like, okay, let's figure this out. And so that was about 6 months before. So if we fast forward 6 months, we found out that we were pregnant. And I was
Wait,
like,
can I pause you?
yeah.
So there was 6 months of you guys going through this process of trying and going through tests and the specialists.
So
I
the
mean,
time,
that's a long time
so
to,
that was actually a longer period. Like, so we actually tried on our own for about 6 months. Then we worked with her doctor for about a year. And then we went to a
wow.
fertility doctor for about 6 to 8 months. So a while, right?
Yeah.
So it's a long process. We're talking almost two
Did
years
you ever
of
lose
trying.
hope?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And we never got completely like angry at other people, right? Because I think that's, you hear that sometimes where people are like, hey, I can't get pregnant, and someone else getting pregnant, now I'm mad, right?
Yeah.
We never really felt that. It was just really like a disappointment.
Hmm.
And you could see it in especially like you look at your spouse and there's a big disappointment for them because there's that motherly, that instinct that's just so natural that just couldn't happen, right?
Hmm.
So we, it was like January, maybe it was March. It had to have been like March is where we decided, hey, we're going to pull back all our applications for podiatry school. I'm going to pursue more heavily the career with the plasma industry. And so we just kind of went full fledged. We were living in a basement apartment. We decided to build a home. So we started building this house and we called it our faith house because we were building a house that was well bigger than what we needed for two people. But we said, hey, we're going to fill it. At some point, it's going to happen.
Hmm.
And so we started building it. And then in August that year, I had applied for an MBA program through an executive program that was going to be online. It was going to be pretty extensive. And then we found out we were pregnant. So we're getting ready to build, to buy this house because it's almost finished. We're starting an MBA. And then all of a sudden we find out we're pregnant. Going to the doctor. And I remember sitting there and they're doing the ultrasound, and because in fertility clinics they're watching you pretty closely, and we had to stop that month. We had stopped doing all of the stuff, like, because she was taking some medicine and there was some interventions there, but she stopped because she was done. She's like,
Yeah.
I'm done trying. But they still wanted to monitor us, or monitor her, I guess I should say. And so we went in and we're getting this ultrasound because she had a positive test. She had worked in a lab and she went and got tested in the lab. And so she knew that she was pregnant. So she's like, okay, let's set up the appointment. She went in.
Okay.
So it was pretty early
Yeah.
on. Like, we're talking like 7 weeks.
Yeah.
And she goes in and I'm kind of sitting behind her. Like, if that chair was there, like, where your camera's at. So a little bit back, and she's moving the ultrasound around. And I've done enough like biology classes. I'm like, that's something, there's something going on here. And I can tell fairly quickly that there's more than one baby there. And Callie's thoughts going through this, like talking after, is she's like, oh, I'm going to miscarry, right? That's her thoughts. Cause throughout the whole process, she kind of had that, like, something's going to go wrong. And so the ultrasound person's like, hey, I got to go get the doctor. Give me a second. She comes back in. Doctor starts checking and she goes, all right, did you see what's going on here? And she's like, no, what's going on? And I'm like, yeah, there's 3 babies in there. And she goes, yeah, you are pregnant with triplets. And like, if I had an Apple Watch at that point, I'm sure my heart rate would have been
Oh
through the
yeah.
roof, and like my mind is racing. Like, how am I going to provide? Like, all of those things start
Yeah.
becoming crazy. That's three weddings, three colleges, teaching three kids to drive a car at 16, right? Like, some of the things,
Yeah.
like all of that stuff started flashing before my eyes a little bit, or in my mind. And so we find out we're having triplets, and we're going to be doing a master's program, and we're moving into a house, and just like all of these things are stacked up all at once. But it reminded me of that time when I'm like, everything's going to be okay, right? And that's probably 6-ish months before this. And so like, it just really taught us that patience, but also
Yeah.
like timing, in God's timing is it's all meant to be. But also I think that it was a connecting time for Callie and I, because we worked through, I would say, one of our biggest trials of our marriage. Because when you're trying to have kids that long and it's not working, like, you fight a lot. And it, like, you learn how to help each other really through that process. And it was, I don't know, at that point where it was like, okay, are we ready for this? Ready or not, here we go, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I think it's kind of an interesting part of it. And then, then having kids and having triplets, we can go into that, because
Yeah.
it's as crazy as you think it is.
I have so many questions. Just to start off, like, did you go home and just like start Googling like what to do? I mean,
Who can give us free stuff? Like,
yeah,
'cause,
yeah, seriously.
at that point, we weren't making great money. We were making enough to, get into a home and all those different things. But it was one of those things that was a little bit stressful. I think that the first thing that we did was really just try to understand what it meant. What did that look like for Callie's health? Because, carrying one baby is hard enough. Like, what does
Yeah.
3 babies look like? How do we prepare for, is there an inevitable, like, she's going to be on bed rest, or is whatever is going to happen there? And so we started doing that, but I think really the preparation started fairly quickly. Obviously, we didn't tell our family right away that we were having triplets. We waited until like October, I think, to tell everybody that we were having triplets. They knew that we were pregnant, but then, it started to become a little bit fun to, surprise people, show them
Yeah.
ultrasounds and all
Yeah.
that fun stuff. But it became really a preparatory time for us, because when 3 kids come in, you're going into quick zone defense, right? It's not man to man right there. You're in zone.
So what changed in your marriage during that pregnancy?
I think that we got better at communicating with each other. And really just, and I think that was kind of that process. And I think communication is something that we're always working on, because it changes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
As kids change, as life changes, careers change. But we really learned how to understand the emotions of what was going on, but then also what that person needed in that moment. Because like, I had to learn how to read, like, hey, am I here to help the situation? Am I here to give suggestions, or am I just listening? Right. And I think you hear that often, right, in that marriage, but it really helped us during that time to just focus on each other and really just say, hey, what can I do to help? Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna shoot some quick fire questions at you. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Do you feel like you were buried in diapers?
For sure. So, so I know this because, so being in business, a lot of things became like, okay, how do I make this happen? So I had Excel spreadsheets. As crazy as it is, like, we had Excel spreadsheets of where we could buy the diapers, how many we needed, and where, like, when to get them, right? So when we needed to reorder,
So you're
kind of like a
dialed
supply.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were going through when they were first born, after they came home from the NICU. They were in the NICU for about 2.5 weeks, and we used 33 diapers a day for the first, like, I don't remember. It was like a month and a half. So that first, like, infant stage, but yeah, 33 diapers a day.
Were you in your new home by then?
Yeah.
Okay.
We moved in September, and they were born in March.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a blessing.
Yeah.
All right.
I have some pictures, like, of like closets, like over a baby shower, and just stacks of diapers, because people understood that, right? We're like, okay, why is everyone giving us diapers?
Yeah.
But then going into it, like, okay, now I see. So we had like newborn for up to 1 and 2. I think we had not enough, but it was a really good start.
Yeah. How did you deal with the sleep deprivation?
That's a fun question. So when we came home from the hospital, one of the blessings of the hospital or the NICU was that one of the nurses in the NICU was a triplet mom, and her kids were like 12 at that point. So she taught Callie so much and helped us, like as parents. Okay, here you have a little bit of time to prepare. Obviously, Callie's trying to heal, but they're like, okay, you need to be prepared for when they come home. How are you going to do this?
Yeah.
Is it all hands on deck, which it basically has to become with 3 kids, or is it like shift work, or how are you going to do that? Are you going to breastfeed and pump the whole time, or are you going to go to formula? Like, you need to make some of those decisions fairly quickly, because with 3 you don't have, the learning curve is pretty steep.
Yeah.
And so we, for the sleep deprivation, is, I don't know how we did it, to be honest. Like, I think back to it today and I really value my sleep.
Yeah.
And we did it though, because what would happen is we'd put them to bed, and when one would wake up, we'd wake up all 3 and feed, change the diaper, and then try to get them back to sleep. And it took an hour to an hour and a half through that whole process from start to finish. And then you try to go to bed, and then it'd be 2.5 hours later, you'd be starting the process again. And obviously that, changes as time goes on, but a blessing in disguise was, hey, I'm doing my master's program, so I would be doing homework while they were
Oh
feeding.
man.
And we figured out how to, like, I don't remember if you remember those cocoa motions. Have you ever heard of
Oh
those?
yeah.
So that's how we warmed up bottles.
Okay.
So we'd get so as soon as the kids started crying, one of us would pop downstairs, put the cocoa motion going, and then we'd get the bottles. Because Callie was able to pump the whole time and feed them for the first year of their life, which is, another miracle in all of that. But she was able to, or we were able to make sure that, hey, like, we have enough milk, let's get them taken care of. We'll get them fed. She was able to do her thing. I was able to take care of them. Then I would do a little bit of homework because I had a hard time going back to sleep. And then we would just, figure that out. And I don't know how we made it through, because we were getting, maybe 3 to 4 hours of sleep at maximum during that first little bit.
For like a
for
year?
6 months.
6 months. Okay.
Because one thing that, maybe the theme is like just the miracles that we saw, is they became really good sleepers pretty quick.
Okay.
About 6 months, they started sleeping through the night, which was amazing, especially with just trying to live life and trying to do all the other things that we had going. And it just changed, and it made things a little bit easier once they were starting to sleep. But I think that process taught us that, hey, like, we're in this together, right? Like, at the end of the day, this parenting thing that we're doing, one of us can't just carry the load. We have to carry it together, or else we're going to fail.
Was there ever a point, or tell me your experience or a moment where you felt like you had your head above water and you're like, hey, we got this?
I don't know that we felt that yet.
Yeah. That was my follow-up question. Have you felt it?
Because people will say, well, is it easier now, right? Like, is it easier? Because our kids are 7 now and almost turning 8. And it is easier in some ways. Like, it's easier in the way that, like, we can have logical conversations. We can have, we can help teach them habits. We can help teach them different things, and they're able to pick up on those skills.
Yeah.
The heart is different. One of the things that I didn't know going into having triplets was that I'm learning to be a parent, because these are our first kids. So I'm learning to be a dad, but I have to learn to be a dad to 3 different individuals at the same time, going through the same events. So, like, they'll go through something like a bully at school, and maybe all 3 of them are doing the same thing at the same time. But the way that I parent the one is going to be vastly different than the way I have to parent the other, because of the way that they are, whether maturity or emotional well-being, all those different things play in. And that becomes pretty taxing. So, like, when I say the hard changes, we went from sleep deprivation to, like, hey, they're into everything. Because if you imagine 3 kids crawling and just getting into everything, baby proofing is not a thing that you can do all the time. And just like those different avenues of life, that I don't know if we had really had the terrible twos, because they were really good kids. But they got into stuff. They cried. And some of my favorite pictures, or some of my favorite times, is really just like being pass out tired. Like, there's a picture that Callie has of where I'm holding all 3 kids on my chest. I'm passed out. They're passed out in a chair. And you're just like, that was life. But that heart is different today. And it's incredible how you just continue to adapt and learn how to change your parenting style to the way that they are. And I think that that's something that a lot of people don't think about when you're talking about triplets, because when you have parent or kids that are coming in line, right? You learn from the first kid. You say, "Oh, I'm going to do this maybe a little bit different," and you still have to parent that other child differently, but you at least have something that you can, go back on, a little foundation. Whereas what's different for us is we have to relearn that through each step of life.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love it. What are you looking forward to most in the next 10 years?
So one of the things that I've really loved, that we've been trying to do, and we're not great at it, is one-on-one time with the kids.
Mhm.
Because, um, again, one of the things that's hard for the kids is really making sure that they feel as an individual, because they're known as the triplets, right? People at school know them, that church, everybody knows them
Right.
as the triplets.
Which you have two boys, one
Two
girl.
boys and a girl, yeah. And so like they play together. They're like this year they're in the same class and those different things, but they are so individual that it's important to us that they have that feeling of individuality,
Right.
and that they know that they are one, that they're, they can have that personality. And so spending one-on-one time with them has been some of my favorite times, because a couple of weeks ago I took Madison. The boys were going to a birthday party, and I was like, "Hey, Madison, let's go to a BYU women's basketball game." And like, she could care less about basketball, and I know that,
Hmm.
but the fact that she could spend one-on-one time, and then she got to see like the different things that were going on, and I think that the fact that it was a women's game, she's like, "Oh, I can play basketball too," like, because you don't
Yeah.
see it a lot,
Yeah.
unfortunately, on TV and those different things, but she was able to maybe relate, but then also she got that just that one-on-one connection with me. And I think that that's been a really fun part of trying to learn how to parent, is how do we make sure that they feel that connection with us individually, because we're always together. Like I mentioned it earlier, we went into zone defense really quick, is the fact that, Callie and I are trying to make sure that we cover all of our bases and make sure that everything is taken care of, that sometimes we forget about, hey, like, one of them may have been experiencing something that's not great today. Are we making sure that we take the time to, have that heart to heart conversation that needs to happen?
Yeah. It sounds like you have to be very aware.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you can't turn it off. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a
interesting.
great way to put it, is that you have to make sure that you're being cognizant of everything that's going on,
Yeah.
and making sure that we're present.
Yeah.
Because like today, technology has made it very easy to disconnect from what we call quote unquote life, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
social media, whatever, watching YouTube video, going on Reddit, whatever it is, it's easy to disconnect, but it's so important that we're present in our kids' life, especially when they're younger, because one of our goals as a couple is that our kids can come and talk to us about anything. And I think most parents have that goal,
Hmm.
but that starts now, right? That starts today, that they're able to feel that comfort level of coming to tell you the good and the bad, and that you can say, okay, let's figure it out. Like let's go through this, because it's, again, being present and being aware, and then making sure that we're not flying off the rocker because they made a
Yeah.
mistake.
Yeah.
Because the mistakes that a 7-year-old is going to make are very different than what a 16-year-old is going to make. But I need to make sure that when they're 16 and making that mistake, that they remember when they were 7, that dad's going to listen, that he's not there to beat me up about the dumb decisions I make, but he's there to help me learn and help me through that situation.
Awesome. Now you have all of this stuff going on in your life and you make this decision to serve the community.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
So, one of the things that, like, growing up is, like, I kind of mentioned, is I had a lot of mentors in life, and one person specific, his name was Larry Bartholomew, and I don't, saving my life might be like too radical, but it really like saved my life in the fact that, like, helped me through situations in life that I needed help with.
Okay.
And so he gave very willingly of himself to me, somebody who was just in his neighborhood, right? And said, "Hey, I'm going to put you on my back, and I'm going to make sure you have the tools that you need to be a good dad, to be a good father, those different things." And he was supplementary to my parents. He didn't take over for them, but he was somebody I looked up to and just really was a selfless servant. So if you fast forward to why I want to serve the community, and it starts with, like, really just wanting to give back to people, because I know that there are people out there like me that really just want to be heard. One thing about being an only child is you become really good at listening. At least in my experience,
Yeah.
is that you become really good at listening to, differing ideas, differing people. And one of the things with politics today is that there's not a lot of listening to each other, right? Like there's not always a lot of like, hey, like what is your opinion and why is it that way? And how can we best, like we may disagree at the end of the day, and that's okay, but at least that you feel heard. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to get into city government is because city government is some of the most important government that we have, because it's the closest to the people and it's the government that affects us on a day-to-day basis. And so I wanted somebody, like I've always wanted somebody to listen to me. And so I want to be that listening ear for other people, but somebody who's going to make critical decisions and do those things. Um, when I look at our family and the dynamic that we have, and you asked, has it gotten easier, right? It has, in the fact that like we are, one of the things that we again learned is how to be organized in our day. And so we are so scheduled, it's pretty crazy. Sometimes people are like, okay, come on, you don't have to schedule everything, but we do. Like if I just pull out my calendar, you'd be like, okay, it's a little ridiculous,
Yeah.
but we're able to fit that time in there. And we as a family decided, when the kids were young, that this was something that we wanted to do to give back, because we received so much service when the kids were infants,
Okay.
that it's like it's a way that we can give back to the community and really help them. But I also think that being somebody who can listen makes it so important to me personally, because then I can then go and help make the best decisions for our community and for people around us.
If people want to serve their community, what are some steps that they can take or resources that they can look into?
Right. So it all just depends, right? So if we're talking about a business community, because I think community means so many different things. And so I'm going to go through
Right.
just different steps of community. So like if I'm in a business community, get involved with your chamber, right? Like there's businesses that want to network together, and sometimes it's self-serving to get involved with the chamber, but there are businesses that can be benefited by Jace coming in and saying, "Hey, this is a better way to maybe do some video." Right? Maybe I can help you. And then they may have an idea of like, hey, here's a better way to maybe get your word out, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I think there's a way to serve there. And there's so many different lessons that people can bring, especially in that. There's church community, like, hey, giving of yourself and saying yes to the things, or maybe even saying, hey, I can do a little bit more today than maybe I did yesterday. Our families are a community within our house. Are we fully serving our families? I think is a question that we sometimes need to ask ourselves. And then when you talk about cities, like there are so many committees that I think that one of the things that most people are shocked by when they get involved in city government or start to learn about it is just how many people it takes to make a good community, right? I right now serve on some different committees in the city, and as a part of my city council responsibilities. And one of them is the art council. The art council does a lot of different things. And they do a youth arts festival in the middle of the summer. And it's a place for 2 weeks where kids can come and they can learn different things. There's ceramics, there's a Lego thing, there's lot theater, there's so many different things. I can't even list them all right now, but it takes so many people to figure it out. And there's people in our community that are starting to talk about it as soon as it ends in June next year. Like there's fiesta days, there's all these things in our community that we live in, but every city has those things. And so really it's just asking and saying, hey, where can I help? And I think that there's somebody I respect that said, lift where you stand, right? And I think that that's the most important thing about service, is finding where you're standing and then say, hey, how can I lift a little bit more? What can I do to carry my load so that I can help other people?
I think we all have needs, right? I want to ask you this question because I'm very interested in what you're going to say. We all have emotional well-being, physical well-being, spiritual well-being. We're serving our community, our family, our religion. When something has to give in your life, what
Yeah.
is it?
So I think that's a really good question, because I think first we have to identify what are those well-beings. Because I think about like the chair that we sit in, and there's pillars or there's legs to that chair. And I think that all of those things play a role in those legs. And we're never going to find true balance in life. I don't think. I don't think that you can say, "Hey, I have the perfect work-life balance," because you hear that. That's a statement that's thrown around a lot. I think there are going to be times where I have to say, "Hey, my work, I have a work project that needs to be done, and so I have to give a little bit somewhere." And maybe that's
Yeah.
a communication with my wife saying, "Hey, tonight, like after the kids go to bed, I've got to work for a few more hours." Or hey, there's maybe this event going on. I just can't make it because I have this work project that I need to do. And I think that the one thing that I think you can never give up is, I guess there's two, is your family has to be number one regardless, because all of the things that I'm doing, whether that's work, whether that's my service to my community, it all stems first from my family, because that's the most important unit in my life. And I think the second is my relationship with whatever that with the higher being, that God,
Hmm.
and saying, what is my relationship with him in Christ? And those two things, as long as those two things come first in all that I'm doing, everything else kind of balances out. um I think, I don't know if it comes from Stephen Covey, but that's who I want to give the credit to, so I don't know. But if you've seen that mason jar, right, or they take the mason jar and they have like the golf balls and the sand and the small rocks, if you know what I'm talking
Yep.
about. And they talk about, like, if you put in the sand first, which is kind of the natural thing to do, is like put the small things in first, then you'll try to fit in the golf balls at the end. It
Hmm.
never fits. But if I put the golf balls in for first, the big things in life, we put those in, and then we let the other stuff kind of fill around it, we can get everything done. But it takes deliberate, like, decisions to say, hey, this is what I find important.
And if someone's frozen on those big decisions and scared to make them, what's your advice moving forward? You've made some big decisions in your life.
Yeah.
What have you done?
I think one of the things that I still find myself in this sometimes, and it's something I think we fight throughout life, is decision paralysis.
Yeah. I love that.
Is
Yeah.
we just have to move. I think that
Yeah.
that's the most important thing, is to keep moving. If I don't know what I need to do, like, someone was asking, so in my career, one of the biggest blessings of my career has been able to help a lot of people reach goals. I've worked with a lot of college kids that are just like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I don't know what I want to become. And I said, hey, my role as a boss is to help you become a better person before you walk out that door. Whenever that is, if you're a better person when you leave, I've done my job. And so one of the things I've told them is just try things, just do them. And you're going to make the wrong choice sometimes, right? There's going to be times where you say, hey, I'm going to go do this. And you realize, hey, I should have been doing this. I
Hmm.
think about another person that you had on here recently with Eric. He's a good friend of both of ours. And the decision that he made to come back from that work trip, right? It resonates with me, because I think that one of the things that I need to decide today is, when those life events happen, am I going to be there? Am I
Yeah.
going to make the decision to be there?
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the things when we have decision paralysis, is say, okay, I don't maybe have the answer today, but I'm going to take a step forward. And that step forward maybe lead to that second step and that third step. And then if we realize, oh, there's a cliff here, okay, then let's pivot and let's go do something else. But I think that that's the most important thing we can do, is just move forward. Don't stay stagnant, because if we're staying stagnant, we become stale, and then we aren't going to move forward ever.
I love that, and I completely agree. That seems like something you've already written a chapter in a book about, the way you put it. So thank you. What do you do to escape, to make sure there's balance in your life? What do you do?
Yeah, so a couple years ago, when the kids were young, so and there's a lot of history here, maybe not even all about being a dad, but I think it all comes into full focus, right? Is I was always like the fat kid, right? Like that was just something that was, I don't want to say it was a part of my identity, but it was.
Hmm.
And so a couple years ago, right after the kids were born, I realized, I was like, I want to be here for their life. I got to make some
Yeah.
changes. Like,
Yeah.
full transparency, like I stopped weighing myself at my peak, and I don't know where that peak was, at 330 pounds. So I was big. And I was like, okay, I gotta make some decisions. I gotta make some changes. And so that change was getting uncomfortable and going to the gym. And I fell in love with going to the gym. And I'm not anywhere near where I want to be goal wise, but I'm a lot healthier today than I was, in 2018 when my kids were born.
Yeah.
or sorry, 2017 when my kids were born. 15. Wow. That
They were a
that
little older when
they
you
were
made
little.
the
Yes.
decision.
They were a little bit older. Yeah. So 2015 they were born. 2018 is when I made that decision. It was
Okay.
like, hey, I need to become healthier. And so what I did is I just started going to the gym, started doing some of those things, and I fell in love with the gym. And so when you ask, what do I do to keep balance? I think there's a few things. One of them is being physically active.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily, I love sports. I'm not good at sports per se. Like I love playing them and I know the fundamentals. Like I can teach my kids how to play
Yeah.
them, but I
Yeah.
wasn't like physically or athletically gifted with any like, hey, you're going to be an amazing baseball player. I played baseball and I love baseball, and I understand the sport really well, but it's not something I'm like naturally gifted at. So I found a physical outlet in that. But I think the other thing that helps me to stay balanced is really my mindset and showing gratitude. One of the things that I've learned from some people just out there is gratitude journaling, taking time every morning to think about the things I'm grateful for. Because when I have an attitude that where my attitude is focused around gratitude, I notice that my day is better, that I'm kinder to my kids, I'm kinder to those that wrong me in the day, that that person who cuts me off on the road. It's a little bit easier to be like, hey, something's going on in their life that they needed to be there, right? Because I think that something that we lose sight of as we go through the day-to-day hustle and bustle of life is that most people are going through something pretty dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
That if we were to treat everybody as if they were going through the worst crisis in life, we're probably going to be right most of the time. And there's plenty of people who have said that, and maybe more eloquently than that. But I think if we treated everybody as if they were going through a crisis, one, we would treat people be better and we would be
Yes.
happier because we wouldn't get so offended by the little things that people do that make us upset.
Take me through gratitude journaling. I'm
Yeah.
kind of familiar with it. I've heard people do it in the morning, people do it at night.
Yeah.
Give me the rundown.
Yeah, so there's a guy that I follow that he has a journal that he's created that helps maybe give some
Like
some
prompts.
some prompts. Yeah, and
Okay.
so the way and that really kind of gave me my segue of, hey, how do I want to do it? And so on his journaling, he does three things you're grateful for, three wins, and then one of the things he does is affirmation statements. So I am statements. I am strong. I am healthy. I am patient. I am a good dad. Like I think sometimes we need to tell ourselves that because sometimes,
Yeah.
we yell at our kids and it's like, shoot, what am I doing here? And then the last thing is I think just giving accounting or just writing our thoughts. I think society or just, maybe not society, myself, is we get so lost in the hustle and bustle of today or social media. And I think that's an easy one to point to. They're like, oh, I'm dialoguing my life. I don't need to journal. But I
Yeah.
think sometimes we need to write out our thoughts because it helps one to get out of our emotions, but it helps me personally to think through what I'm doing. So when I say gratitude journaling, it means something different to everybody. I think it's just finding a way to show God that we're thankful, but also just trying to set our intentions on being grateful. Because if we're putting that kind of out there, we're going to see more things to be grateful for. And that's one thing with gratitude journaling is when people do it, they start out and they're like, I don't know what to write. Like, I'm grateful for clothes. I'm grateful for
Yeah.
my house.
Yeah.
But then it becomes deeper. It's like, hey, I'm grateful for the construction worker who's doing work on the road in the snow, or the snowplow driver that's making it so I can get to work safely and then my family can get to where they need to be. Right. And I think that sometimes it gets a little bit even more in depth than that and more personal, because it's you in this piece of paper and you're able to put that there in confidence that, hey, I get to write whatever I want to here. And I think that that's one thing that we miss with a lot of that person to person interaction that's not as prevalent today as it maybe was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
is that we
Yeah.
aren't expressing ourselves out there in the same way.
Yeah. And I think people love to say they are.
Yeah.
I'm authentic on social media, but no one's going to go out and share everything on social
Right.
media. But that I like that because it allows you to self-reflect.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think one of the most important things that we can do in this life is being authentic to ourselves. Because
Yeah.
how many times are we telling ourselves a lie about ourselves? You think about when you talk down to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you're lying to yourself, right? Like if I'm to say, hey, I'm a bad parent. Okay, maybe I had a bad moment as a parent, and maybe there's some room to improve, and there always is.
Yeah.
But really, when you get down to it, is like, if I was a bad parent, would I be feeling that? If I was a bad parent, would I be really trying to maybe be intentional about, bedtime and making sure it's a good thing, or telling my kid no, that they couldn't play the Nintendo because, and that's what made me feel like a bad parent because I told them no and they freaked out at me.
Yeah.
Like that never happens.
Yeah.
But I think that, really being intentional with ourselves and being real. I think that's something that we've lost today. And I think it's something that we need to be real about, is being real with our relationships, but being real with and it starts with ourselves. Being real with ourselves is going to be that foundation so that I can be real with you, or I can be real with my spouse, or my parents or my kids.
Yeah.
But it has to start within.
Yeah. I feel like our mindset is something that is constantly developing, but in my personal experience, there are markers where I've had very specific and large mind shifts.
Yeah.
What have you done to experience those mind shifts?
So I think the first one is being intentional with myself, and wanting to develop myself.
Okay.
Because as a manager of people, it's really easy to give of yourself, or even like when we talk about serving your community, it's really easy to just give of yourself and just say, hey, I'm going to be there for other people. I'm going to be there for whomever it is. Right.
Yeah.
But like really being intentional and saying, I want to work on myself and I want to make myself better. And when I'm making myself better, it's going to make the other avenues of my life better. Because I think about like going to the gym. When I first started going to the gym, like we're talking, my kids are 3. Like that, like by some could be seen as very selfish, and
Yeah.
and a very like, hey, why are you doing this? But like what it did is it helped me to show up better for them because I felt better about myself and what I'm doing. Right. And we've made it adaptations to that. Right. I don't go to the gym every day now. We built a home gym in our basement because we saw that, hey, like the gym here is very busy. So
Yeah.
if I want to get a workout in and it's not, I don't have the time to go down to the gym because it's going to take a little bit longer. I can go in my basement and I can work out and I can get the same workout and get the same feeling, those endorphins, and really feeling good about myself, but without having to spend that time. And so I think that we can find those ways to make everything work. It's just really about that intention. Like, and working on ourselves is an important thing, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah. I think I get the impression that a lot of men nowadays feel stuck, and it may be hard for them to make that decision right there to just start, to just move.
Yeah.
Right. But the other side of that is self discipline, self love, gratitude,
Yeah.
and it can be a beautiful thing. But even for me, just starting something sometimes seems like this massive mountain. But
Yeah. You think about like the boulder at the top of a mountain, or the snowball, right? You use some of those analogies that we've all
yeah,
seen.
yeah,
A snowball doesn't start off big, or an avalanche doesn't start off as an avalanche. It starts off as, one snowflake.
hmm
But that snowflake gains momentum as it starts moving and it becomes something massive. And you could use that with so many different things. Like energy starts somewhere and it ends somewhere else because it starts to move.
yeah,
And if we don't move, we're gonna stay still. Or like I think about some of the people I've talked to, some of the friends or whatever coworkers, and when they talk about like feeling stuck or feeling like they can't go anywhere, and we're all gonna have those feelings,
hmm
but a lot of times we set in that emotion for too long, and we become comfortable with feeling stuck. And there's a line from The Greatest Showman, and I get made fun of because it's from The Greatest Showman, but whatever. But in there, they say, comfort is the enemy of progress. And I think that is key to what we're talking about, because we become comfortable with our life situations. We become comfortable with, hey, after the kids go to bed, I'm going to watch Netflix for 2 hours, then I'm going to go to bed. Where it's like, hey, I'm going to disrupt this and I'm going to read a book. I'm going to read, 75 Hard is such a big thing that people did. It's because it disrupted their lifestyle
yeah,
and they started doing something different. And I think that that's really what we need to do, is we disrupt ourselves and we get it uncomfortable, and then we're going to see that progress. And then, okay, then what's that next step after that? And it doesn't have to be a goal. It doesn't have to be something that we're setting as like, hey, I have to get this done. But I think just becoming a little bit better than I was yesterday.
yeah,
And that can be in any avenue of life. It doesn't have to be in a specific one. Maybe you're focusing on a specific one for a duration of time, and then I'm going to change that. But I think that just finding ways to improve every day is key to just success, both as a father, as a husband, as a friend.
I love it. Just to wrap up the episode, I have a question that I ask all my guests,
Okay.
and that is, if there's one lesson that you want your kids to learn, and stick with them when you're no longer here, what is that lesson?
Yeah, I've listened to some of your podcasts as we've talked about, but I really didn't give that much thought. But I think that what I would want my kids to know after I'm gone is that one, that I did my best as a father, that I was always trying, but then two, that they were always loved. Because I feel like that is something that scares me the most in today's day. Um, is that there's so many people that feel unloved, that and I don't think it's like, there's no, if there was a silver answer to this, right, we would have it and we would be figuring it out. And I don't know that there's one reason why people don't feel loved, but it breaks my heart when I hear that. But I would
Hmm.
want my kids to know that they were always loved by their dad.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thanks for being here,
Yeah.
sharing your stories, insights, and experiences.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Cool.